As the late Heath Ledger's Joker once said, "It's not about money, it's about sending a message." But as far as this film goes for the studio, I think it is mostly about the money. 2019's Joker was something of a sleeper hit, raking in over $1 billion worldwide on a budget of less than $70 million, so of course they were keen to cash in with a sequel. But for writer and director Todd Phillips, I think it really is about sending a message. Specifically, a message to fans of the first film that he hates you and wants to destroy all the things you think you love. But more on that later. When I first heard the news that Joker Folie Deux would be a musical featuring Lady Gaga as Harley Quinn, I naturally assumed it would be terrible, and would amount to little more than an excuse for Gaga to belt out modern-day show tunes while Joaquin Phoenix unleashes chaos as Joker. Then, like many people, I was briefly led astray when the first trailers dropped and actually managed to make it look at least halfway decent. But now I've finally had time over the festive period to sit through the whole film, it turns out I was right the first time. It really is terrible, but actually, not for the reasons I was expecting. For one thing, Lady Gaga as Harleen Quinzel is actually one of the better things about it. She takes the part well, with this reimagining of the character portrayed as a kind of obsessive Joker fangirl, who's in love with the idea of the Joker and his antics as an act of rebellion against the harsh realities of modern life, despite the fact she actually had a fairly comfortable or even privileged upbringing herself. At the start of the film, she's had herself committed to Arkham State Hospital, where Arthur Fleck is awaiting trial for his crimes from the first film. A series of rather unlikely but convenient coincidences bring her and Arthur face to face and allow them to strike up a relationship. As before, the story is largely told from Arthur's perspective, and he's a spectacularly unreliable narrator. So we aren't sure exactly how much of what's portrayed on screen is meant to have literally happened, but Harley's existence is acknowledged by other characters, so she's not meant to be entirely a figment of Arthur's imagination. Now, what should have happened next is Arthur and Harley being portrayed as the worst possible thing for each other, with their relationship reinforcing and amplifying each of their neuroses and leading them into a self-destructive spiral that is a danger to them and the people around them. That would have been a good film, the kind of film I wouldn't regret paying to see. Instead, the second act degenerates into a rather tedious courtroom drama that, with the possible exception of Gary Puddle's testimony, is almost entirely forgettable. Then, as punishment for statements he's made about them in court, Arthur is taken aside by some of the guards at Arkham and, how shall I put this, subjected to a particularly thorough inspection of his prison wallet. My problem with this scene isn't the fact that it happened, it's that it actually works, and this brutal humiliation makes Arthur face up to the realities of his crimes and give up the Joker persona just as it was starting to look like things might be getting interesting. Now, just imagine the reaction if the genders were reversed here. Imagine the outcry if it was Harley being subjected to a bit of corrective you-know-what, making her see the error of her ways and turn over a new leaf. In reality, as soon as Arthur accepts he isn't really the Joker, Harley loses all interest in him and walks out of court. With all the subtlety of a sledgehammer, I think this is Todd Phillips' way of holding a mirror up to the audience who stop caring about Arthur the moment we realise we aren't really watching the origin story of a Batman villain. Because what could possibly have given us that idea, right? Besides the fact it's named after Batman's arch-nemesis and takes place in Gotham City. Or does it? The courtroom scenes go out of their way to let us know this is the case of the people of the state of New York versus Arthur Fleck. Gotham is usually portrayed as being in the state of New Jersey, not New York, and I think this is meant to make us question whether these films really even take place in the Batman universe, or if that's another of Arthur's delusions. Except, of course, that he meets characters named Bruce and Thomas Wayne as well as their butler Alfred, unless you're going to tell me they're figments of his imagination too, at which point the discussion becomes moot because you can choose to ignore any scenes that don't support whatever argument you want to make. But why does Mr. Todd go so far out of his way to destroy his own work and legacy just to get one over on the fans he obviously despises? Well, I think a lot of people in Hollywood and the wider media were actively annoyed at the success of the first Joker film and the way it dared to suggest that a white man might actually have problems fitting into modern society. There were even fears it would lead to a wave of incel violence, a term that's become so hackneyed it's lost any real meaning. But as usual, I think a lot of these people are failing to grasp exactly why Joker struck a chord with the viewing public. There's a big difference between empathising with that desire for a cathartic release and actually endorsing the crimes Arthur commits in the first film. And incidentally, giving in to your repressed rage and frustration and lashing out at the world like that isn't a sign of strength or something to be applauded. Quite the opposite, in fact. It's a sign of weakness. But that's okay when we thought we were watching the origin of a villain. The best villains don't know they're the villain. They think they are the victim. Some people have simplistically posed the question, if you really care about Arthur, don't you want to see him get better? And my answer is a resounding no, for exactly the same reasons I don't want to watch a film about Batman turning bad. But anyway, in a purely technical sense, this probably wasn't the absolute worst film of 2024, but it is the one I most regret watching, and will be remembered as one of the most damaging and least necessary sequels of all time. So if you're a fan of the original film and don't want your memories of it ruined by a bitter and resentful director, I suggest you do yourself a favour and give this one a miss.